Once a month, when the moon reaches its highest point in the sky and the wild creatures call out to the night, he emerges from a private sanctuary in an undisclosed location outside of Little Rock, Arkansas. Arrayed in his priestly vestments, carrying forth the good news that comic books and graphic novels aren't just for kids, that they aren't just masked and spandex superheroes, that storytelling in a graphic format can be so much more. He is the Graphic Novel Apostle.
Hello and welcome back to the Graphic Novel Apostle. I'm your host, Mark Ohrenberger, and I'm happy to be here with you always on this fine Monday morning. Although I am coming to you from a slightly different place than usual today. I am in Hillsborough, North Carolina, home of my parents, Kevin and Karen Ohrenberger, and that is because I have a very special guest coming on the podcast with me here today. None other than the woman maybe best known as the mother of the graphic novel apostle himself, Ms. Right. Karen Ohrenberger. Karen, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mark. I never knew I was going to have an apostle for a son.
Well, you beat me to the question. I wondered all those years ago, going back 43 years ago in your life now, you're in a Spanish-speaking hospital in a small community on the outskirts of Los Angeles, and they hand you this beautiful, perfect baby boy. And
That's right.
You look down into his wet, shining green eyes, and you look in and you see the whole world reflected back at you, and you see all the possible futures that can be for this young man. And in any of those, did you see a graphic novel apostle?
No, and I didn't see a child with green eyes.
What are you talking about?
What color are your eyes?
I've always said my whole life I had green eyes. Do you not think so?
No, I've always said hazel.
Oh, well, maybe it was a different child you were holding.
It was my other family.
Well, very good. Hey, Mom, you and Dad have been great. You all were out visiting me several months ago now when we were really just in the process of starting to record our first episodes even before release, and I was telling you guys about this, and Dad maybe seemed a little more skeptical or maybe a little less interested, and you were instantly supportive. And so thank you for that. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. I always want to support you guys, you and your sister and all the kids, whatever they want to do.
Well, thanks. That's been really great. And it's been really fun being here with you the last day or so, and Dad as well. I've made the drive out from Arkansas to North Carolina here to drop Garrett off for about a week of grandparent time after I leave tomorrow to go home. And God bless you, because you and the young man Garrett are going to have some quality time.
We will.
And I'm going to have some quality time without the young man Garrett.
You will.
So I'm looking forward to that as well. And, I got to say, it's exciting to be recording in a different location this week, although it was much harder to find a private sanctuary from an undisclosed location on the outskirts of Hillsborough, North Carolina, than it is in Little Rock, Arkansas. Anyway, with all that out of the way, Mom, thank you so much for doing this. I am really excited to have you on.
Thank you for asking me.
And so let me introduce the book that we're going to be talking about today. Listeners of this podcast will have heard me gush plenty about Ed Brubaker in the context of his partnership with Sean Phillips, the artist. For those of you who are listening, you may remember our criminal episode that we did with my friend Peyton. It was episode 2 of the podcast. We talked about a crime story that he did, and crime and noir detective type stories are really where Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips have made their bread and butter over the years. This is with a different artist, and it's a very, very different project. So the book we're here to discuss today is Friday. It's book 1 of 3, and it's called The First Day of Christmas. This book, as I said, written by Ed Brubaker, art done by Marcos Martin, a Spanish artist, and colors by Muntsa Vicente. The print copies that you and I looked at for preparing for this episode were published by Image Comics back in 2021, but that was not the first place they appeared. The 3 issues, or the 3 chapters that are collected here in book 1 of Friday, were originally published digitally through panelsyndicate.com. This is a really interesting digital publisher, I guess I'll call it. Maybe digital platform is the better way to describe it. I'm not entirely sure. But at panelsyndicate.com, this was started back in 2013 by Brian K. Vaughan. He's a comics writer who is going to be very, very familiar to comic book readers. Also someone who has done a lot of work in Hollywood, writing television and movie scripts. And he and artist Marcos Martin, who's our artist on this series as well, along with colorist Muntsa Vicente, created this originally to publish their own creator-owned comic called The Private Eye. And I have never read that series, but I'm interested in doing so. But so the way that digital comics distribution platform works is that whatever books are created there are uploaded by the creators, and they have a pay-what-you-want model. So there is no price listed. You go to click on either a single issue or a collection, and you click Buy Now, and then you type in the price that you wish to pay. You can also type in $0. Which, folks, this money is going directly to the creators as opposed to some publishing company in the middle. So I would encourage you to pay something if you are in fact going to do that. And then what you end up getting after you complete your purchase is a DRM-free digital copy of the comic, whether that's a PDF or a couple of different formats they offer. And Mom, I try not to talk very much to my guests about their experience with the book before we start recording, and we mostly stuck to that with this episode as well, but we've been here for, I've been here for more than a day at this point, and one of the things you mentioned to me was that, you read the physical copy of this book, and it's smaller than a regular comic book in terms of its size. And you commented that you sort of wished that, with your eyes at your advanced age, Mom.
Thank you, son.
You're welcome. You wished that you could have, read some of the words a little bigger or looked at some of the pictures a little more closely. And so I thought, oh, well, shoot, we've got a perfect solution for that. So I went and downloaded a copy of, now you can get the entire version of Friday, the entire book, all 9 individual chapters or all 3 collected volumes as one single PDF download there at panelsyndicate.com. So we got a copy for you, and when you read book 3, so chapters 7, 8, and 9, which you have not done yet, and I have not done yet, even though I've bought a copy, it was just released about a week ago in paper format, you'll be able to resize any of the panels you want to look at or any of the word bubbles, and so hopefully that'll be a better reading experience. Something you commented to me as well, though, Mom, was about your experience with the color. And, just in the hour or so before we've recorded, you've had a chance to look a little bit at the digital copy. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, on the print copy, I found that the dark pages were harder for me to make out, the actual artist's work, some of it. It's beautiful, but it was just a little harder to see. And then when I saw it on the digital copy, everything looked more vibrant somehow.
Yeah, Mom, I have been having these conversations with people as I've prepared for these different episodes, and I still really love I like collecting the single issues and going to the comic book shop every week and getting a paper copy. And I think I'm going to start collecting fewer single issues, maybe get issue number 1s, and then for the series that I feel like I can't wait for the trade paperback to come out, I'll continue to buy those too. But for more and more, I'm going to try and stick to just issue 1 and then have that nice trade paperback or bound copy that I can put on the shelf. But I gotta say, I really do find that sometimes it is a better artistic experience, reading experience of the art, maybe would be a better way to say that, on the digital versions.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. The colors really pop.
And I think, too, and maybe this is just my own perception or the light in the places where I'm reading, but I think the colors look better usually in the single issues than they do in the collected volumes.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
And, you would have no reason to, because, I realize, Mom, you are not what we call sometimes a Wednesday warrior, someone going to pick up single issues of comic books.
No, I'm not.
In fact, when was the last time you might say you had read a comic book before this?
When did you start reading them? You were maybe 10?
Okay. Did you read some of my X-Men comics then?
Actually, no.
Okay, so never?
Never.
Well, so...
Sorry, dear.
No, that's all right. Hey, so Mom, you are our first person who would be from the boomer generation.
Awesome.
That's great. That's great. Who has appeared as a guest on this show. So tell me, did you ever, as a kid growing up in rural Indiana, come across any kind of comic books? I mean, back then, there were lots of Donald Duck, Richie Rich, that kind of thing.
Archie.
Sure.
Those kind of things. But I certainly never bought any of that. I never spent money on any of those things. It just was never something that I thought about.
Sure. Well,
I always liked the comics in the paper.
sure. So, what was your experience of reading this book? Did you enjoy reading a graphic novel?
I did.
Good.
I did enjoy it.
And I realized I left you with a pretty good cliffhanger. You know, Friday was written to be told in, say, 3 acts. So we've got the first 3 chapters here that make up book 1. And then, book 2 is chapters 4 through 6. And then the most recently released book 3 is the last 3 issues or chapters. And so it does leave you on a bit of a cliffhanger here.
It definitely was a cliffhanger.
So let me just read the solicit or the blurb on the back of the book that you could get when you picked up book 1. It says, Friday Fitzhugh spent her childhood solving crimes and digging up occult secrets with her best friend Lancelot Jones, the smartest boy in the world. But that was the past, and now she's in college starting a new life on her own. Except when Friday comes home for the holidays, she's immediately pulled back into Lance's orbit and finds that something very strange and dangerous is happening in their little New England town. This is literally the Christmas vacation from hell, and they may not survive to see the new year. So before we dive too deep into talking about the story itself, I want to talk to you a little bit about why I picked this book for you. And what did you think? Because, that's been part of the format here where I've tried to pick books for certain people. So Tell me your thoughts.
Well, I actually am very interested in hearing what you have to say. I know that I like mysteries. And this one is about teenagers. And I taught high school, so I thought perhaps that was part of your rationale.
I mean, certainly that makes a ton of sense. And I do know you've always loved mystery novels. But for me, it was the setting more than anything. It was the fact that this is set in winter in a small New England town. So, of course, I grew up in Milford, Connecticut, just outside of New Haven. Not where you're from, but where you made most of your adult life.
38 years.
Wow, was it that long?
Yep.
I left home at 17 to go off to college, moved to Arkansas, and once I did, that's such a long distance away. A lot of the time, the only times I would come home would be, of course, summer vacation from college, but Christmas time as well. And even that first year, as I think back to my freshman year of college, I came home 2 times for that entire year. Once at Thanksgiving, and then at Christmas for about a month. And so even when New England was not my lived experience, moving into adulthood, New England at Christmas time still was. And as an adult.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, even when I went through law school and into my professional career, Christmas was a time I would make to come back home. And so I would still experience a bit of New England winter. And I feel like Marcos Martin and Muntsa Vicente nailed New England winter.
They certainly did.
I mean, it felt like home when I was reading this.
Interesting.
You told me a story yesterday, Mom, dealing with New England winters that I only vaguely remembered, and maybe not even in the way that, or I wouldn't have known it in the detail that you told yesterday. So there was a period of time when I was growing up when you were teaching at Bethel High School in Bethel, Connecticut, which was, about a 45-minute drive from Milford?
Yes.
So would you talk a little bit about your experience? And what years are we talking about?
Well, let's see. I have to go back.
You started teaching at my high school in Milford in 1997. I guess it would really be your high school because you taught there 20-something years. But you started in 1997. So it was the 4 years immediately prior to that you taught in Bethel?
Yes.
Okay, so basically the mid-90s.
Yeah.
And for people who may be in New England listening or anywhere in the Northeast or frankly anywhere north of Arkansas, these snow days are a part of your life when the winter starts to roll around.
They are.
And that really starts coming in like November and keeps up through like March. Mm-hmm. And you had a bit of a dilemma having that 45-minute drive ahead of you because, a lot of times school starts out as there's a 90-minute delay or a 60-minute delay, and then they make the decision whether to cancel it or not.
Right.
And you were telling me a story of one of those kind of mornings where you had to make that choice.
Yeah, I left home one morning driving my husband's car instead of the one I normally drive, which was a...
Well, so you had a Ford Taurus at the time.
I did.
I think it was a 93 Ford Taurus.
It was a wagon.
Ford Taurus station wagon.
Yes.
That's right. And Dad had, this was Dad's cool car.
Yeah.
It was a 1995 Mitsubishi Eclipse.
That's right.
Ooh, and it was red, and it had those headlights that popped up out of the hood.
Yes.
Oh man, that was cool. But you were more comfortable driving the Eclipse.
Yes.
Excuse me, the Taurus.
Yes, and I knew it was, the temperature that day was right on the edge of ice and snow. So we had no idea what was going to happen. But as I headed toward Bethel, of course, it was more inland, and we were going to get more, what I thought would be more snow, but it actually turned to ice, a sheet of ice, the entire road. And I found myself in a ditch.
Yeah. Well, you hit a spot of black ice on the road.
The whole road was ice.
Oh, my goodness.
We were all sliding around, every car and truck that went by me. I was just praying nothing happened.
Sure. Well, it's some of the, aside from the fact that there's a station wagon in this story, even though it's not what you were driving at the time, it's then when you're in the ditch and you're trying to get out of the car. And, I said something yesterday about another story, like, well, that was really pre-cell phone. I had a cell phone. It was a box about the size of a shoebox. Yeah, you can't even call it a cell phone. You had a bag phone.
I had a bag phone. I did. And because of the way that the car landed in this ditch, the car was sort of tipped forward, and my cell phone box flew off into the passenger's floor. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I couldn't reach it.
Oh, my goodness.
There was no way I could get to it. And my car, the door on the left, the driver's side door would not open. So that was a bit of a panic.
Well, and we were talking about this yesterday. In that Eclipse, it had those, and you don't see this in cars anymore either,
No.
but it had those seat belts where you got in and you pulled the lap belt across your lap. And then when you pulled the door shut, this like mechanical track ran and it pulled the shoulder strap up over you.
Yes.
And we were wondering if maybe that was, this was our speculation talking about it, whether that's like what could have caused the, problem with the door.
It's
Who
quite
knows?
possible. I have no idea. I just know eventually I finally got the door open, got out of the car, and then I couldn't stand up on the ice. And some lovely people who lived in a house nearby took me in.
Yeah.
And it was a couple of hours before the police could get there and a tow truck to get me out. It was quite an experience.
Oh my goodness. And then of course they ended up canceling
They
school.
canceled school after. Yeah. Yeah, that was kind of a bummer.
So you really never had to leave the house that day. Oh. Yeah, that's tough.
It is. Those country roads, though, are really hard to drive on.
Sure.
In the winter.
Well, you talk about having a hard time standing up when you got out of the car, too. I can remember walking home from the bus stop. So, maybe a quarter of a mile, but around the next street, around the bend, I guess, walking home on different days as an elementary school student from the bus stop, like slipping and sliding in my sneakers, not being able to stand sometimes, because it had snowed and then it had started to rain and iced over the top.
Right.
And falling down repeatedly, just trying to walk home. So, I look back on that kind of wistfully. Yeah. But yeah, I suppose there were times where that wasn't so fun either.
Well, it's interesting to me that the winter scene was what captured you on this.
It was, Mom, because the first time, and so I read this Friday, Volume 1 or Book 1 for the third time preparing for this. And the last time I'd read it before was right at Christmas this past year. And I don't know if it's going to become my Christmas tradition to read Friday every year, but I think it's going to be something I revisit at that time of year.
Fun.
But when I read this book for the first time, it immediately made me feel home, especially the scenes in this book that take place at night. Because, something they got so right in depicting a winter in New England is, you've got the daytime scenes where it's extra bright or it feels extra bright, because once you've got that layer of ice or snow, you can go snowblind.
Yeah.
You
the reflection is incredible.
Right.
But at night, it's really beautiful.
Gorgeous.
Yeah.
Gorgeous. And, maybe I've been gone so long from being that cold all the time that I can think a little more romantically about it, because it could get miserable too. But yeah, seeing the footprints in the snow and thinking back to snow days where as a kid in school, you'd be off. And this is pre-internet, so there's no, here are your assignments for that you got to do today from home.
Right. You and your sister sat on the couch watching the Weather Channel.
Yeah.
Waiting to find out if school was going to be canceled.
Of course. And, you didn't want to take your shower too early.
Exactly.
When you could skip that if it was. But, on those days where school would be canceled, because you were a teacher.
Oh, we did our dance too. The teachers have their special snow dance.
Sure. Well, I have no doubt you did. But from my kid experience, that also meant you were home.
Yes.
And so Kelly and I, my sister, and for listeners who don't know me personally, my sister Kelly is 3 years younger than me. And so Kelly and I would be outside shoveling, playing in the snow for a lot of the day. I mean, just outside as much as we absolutely could be. And you'd be seeing that from out the window. Mm-hmm. And so many, those days where it was a snow day, it was like time just drug. And not in a bad way. It was like a snow day went on forever.
Yes. And what did you get when you came in?
We got hot chocolate.
That's right.
Holy cow. Mom was in there cooking that up.
With your little Nestle Quick or whatever it was.
That's right. Yeah, the Nestle Quick in the tin, and you get the back end of your spoon to kind of pry the cap off.
Yes, that's the one.
Oh, those were great. But, I think of so many, fun things Kelly and I did. Shoveling all the snow off of the deck and letting it pile up in the yard right there beneath it, and then going off the rail of the deck in our inner tubes, because we could, create your own slope right there if the snow was deep enough. I remember one time we used that big pile of snow beneath the edge of the deck to tunnel out and make an igloo inside. We spent the whole day making this igloo, that was big enough for me and Kelly to get inside. We had a pretty straight driveway, and so we'd shovel all the snow off the side to the edge of the driveway. And then you could make a tunnel in that big, mound of snow that you would have created. Those things were so cool.
Yep. You guys had a lot of fun in the snow, for sure.
We did. And, there was this period of time where Kelly and I both, there was a family that lived a mile and a half up the road, the Prues. And the Prue family lived in this neighborhood where every house had kids about our age, on a cul-de-sac. And their yard backed up to woods that was owned by a gravel company that was far enough on the other side of the woods that there was no one bothering the kids from going in there and playing in the woods. And Kelly had a friend, Tammy, who was the daughter in that family at her same age. And the two boys were, one was my age and one was just a year, maybe two younger, but was friends with both of them. And man, we'd go up there and we'd go play in the woods in the snow, and we'd go sledding in the snow down these big hills. We had a hill called, Devil's Hill or Devil's Canyon or something like that. Those were just fun times.
Yeah, it was all fun and games until you hit a tree and came home with your braces hanging off of your...
Yeah, that happened. Holy, that happened one time too. We were back out there at Devil's Hill, and what I was probably middle school age.
No, you were 11 maybe.
Oh, really? Younger?
Yeah, you were young.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I had braces on for 6 years, all of my childhood into even through my freshman year of high school, so hard to pinpoint. But yeah, we'd gone sledding back there, and it wasn't a tree. At least this is my recollection, that it wasn't a tree. It was that I'd gone sledding down this hill, and we're on these plastic sleds. From the top of the hill, you couldn't see the bottom of the trail because you'd go around a little curve or there were trees in the way or whatever. But I got to where I was coming to the end, and I think it was Chris Dunn who was standing on the trail facing the opposite direction, so didn't see me coming, and was holding his sled down at his side. And I was scared and couldn't yell out to him to get out of the way, and I just plowed into him and took him off his feet, and I think it was his plastic sled that just hit me in the face.
Oh, okay. All these years I thought it was the tree.
Oh, my goodness. And I remember I looked at Jason Prue. I could feel that my braces had broken. And I said, my teeth, my front teeth, I think have all come out. Is that true? And he said, yeah. And I don't know if he heard the question differently than I asked it or whatever it was. Maybe just a moment of panic. Maybe I had snow all over those braces.
That's funny.
But, we went running up the hill, and that was...
Mrs. Prue brought you to my house.
Okay. See, I thought it was Mr. Prue.
No, I think it was Mrs. Prue brought you to our house, and... Of course, I'm panicking, and the first thing that comes out of my mouth is, I told you to be careful. That makes a difference.
Sure. A good early 90s mom.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness. And, I mean, you had to rush me to an orthodontist and,
Oh, yeah.
and get those braces fixed that day. That's quite a memory.
Yeah, it is.
But, it kind of goes into the mix here. And I was thinking about that as I was reading, because a lot of this book takes place in the woods.
It does.
And, as Lancelot Jones and Friday Fitzhugh, such great names, are, trudging through the snow. So let me ask you, this book is a story of kid detectives who are at the end of their childhood now. I mean, they're college age now. But for years and years, they had grown up solving mysteries in their small New England town, a la the Scooby-Doo gang, I suppose.
Right.
Because some of those would be crime and some of those would be like local, is this place haunted kind of things. And I've heard Ed Brubaker in interviews when talking about this series talk specifically about the character Encyclopedia Brown from those books from the 1960s, which I've actually never read. But, the same idea, story of a boy detective and his, friend going around solving local mysteries. And I know that Dad read a lot of like Hardy Boys mysteries as a kid, because I remember he even had some of those books when I was little that he wanted to pass down, and I never really did read them much. Did you ever do like Nancy Drew or the Hardy Boys?
I was totally into Nancy Drew.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So were you feeling any of that coming through in reading this? Or were you thinking back to that at all?
Honestly, no, I didn't. I think I was so caught up in the difference of the graphic novel as opposed to a regular novel where you just read the story.
Sure.
So I didn't think about that.
Okay.
But I love Nancy Drew mysteries and the Hardy Boys. I read all of those series.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I guess we're about 30 minutes into our podcast. Maybe it's time to talk about the book.
Okay.
All right. Well, let's start with chapter 1, The Girl in the Trees. I always say this. We're not going to go through every single page of the story. But I do want to start with the opening page. And this is a double-page spread that just says chapter 1, The Girl in the Trees. And you've got this beautiful drawing of an aerial view, or maybe from a mountaintop view, looking down on this coastal New England small town with the snow falling all around it. And this town actually has a lighthouse, and we'll learn that Lancelot Jones's father is the lighthouse keeper.
Right.
But we see all of this, and you see some of the ocean, and it's just beautiful.
It is beautiful.
So our story begins with Friday Fitzhugh. She's coming home from her first semester of college for Christmas break. And as far as we can tell, this is the first time she has been home since she left for college a few months earlier. And the way our story is being told, we're kind of getting two elements of storytelling happening at the same time. We have a disembodied third-person narrator who is telling us the story and really telling us about what Friday Fitzhugh is thinking, what her emotions are as she's going through this. But then in the pictures and dialogue, we're seeing the story happening. And so, you've got what's going on in Friday's head, and then you've got what's going on in Friday's actual behavior in front of us. And, sometimes I try to limit some of the little asides, and here we are one page in, and I'm ready to do another one.
You were always a good talker, Mark. Make it a short story.
You told me that a lot, didn't you, as a
did.
kid? And Garrett, God bless him, all I want is for him to be quiet so much of the time. Because
What goes around comes around.
yeah, I know that you're feeling a lot of zen about that.
Yeah, I do.
Oh my goodness gracious, Mom. And I come here and I visit you and Dad, and man, I mean, same with Dad. I'm like, all right, Dad, we could make a shorter version of this story.
Yes.
And I know I'm every bit as guilty of it, but well, here we go. So our story opens with Friday traipsing through the snowy woods by flashlight alongside Lancelot Jones and the town sheriff, and they're working on a case. I mean, this is how it begins. And the narrator is telling us that she's actually only been back in her hometown for about 30 minutes. She hasn't even been to her home yet. And she's got something on her mind. She needs to talk to Lancelot about the last night before she left for college. And she's frustrated because she wants to have this conversation that you can tell she's been having in her head for months, and thinking about how she's going to address. Lancelot is obviously somebody extraordinarily important to her, and she's felt distant from him during the time she's been away at school, in part because of something, whatever it was, that happened on the last night before
Right.
she left.
They had a few phone calls during the semester,
Sure.
but those were a little awkward too, and we don't know why.
Right. And so Lancelot and the sheriff meet her at the train station, and they just pick her up. And as much as Friday wants to talk about the issue that she wants to talk to Lancelot about, he is just, we're on a case, get in the car. We're going to head out to the woods. And they're picking up just as what their normal routine would have been during what we know is about 6 years of their childhood together, through those awkward middle school years and their high school years. And for Lancelot, we learn as well, those would have been especially awkward years for Lancelot, because even though he's actually younger than Friday, he was 2 years of grades ahead of her in school.
That's right.
And so, he was obviously a prodigy type child, and you can tell that he's very socially awkward throughout all of this. And who knows, maybe Lancelot is just being awkward. Maybe he's trying to avoid discussing the issue that he probably knows that Friday wants to discuss with him. Or maybe he's just this dialed in whenever he has a case in front of him. Later we'll be told that she knows that Lancelot never sleeps when they're like hot on a case, close to getting one solved. And so they start tracking through the woods immediately. And they've got these flashlights out and they're going on through. And at some point they stop. And Friday says, I think I just saw somebody watching us. She thought it looked like a person, and she thought maybe it was a girl or a woman that was watching them, but they never did quite figure out exactly what that was.
Right.
Lancelot points out that they're right near Crescent Rock, and he starts basically telling the sheriff, and I think the sheriff is such a funny non-character in this story.
Yes, he is.
Because you've got this town or county sheriff, I guess, who lets Lancelot ride shotgun on all of his cases.
He may be riding shotgun, but he's calling all the shots.
That's right, riding shotgun and controlling the cases.
Yes.
And then on top of that, we'll see in a moment, there's a physical altercation that takes place, and he just... Instead of the sheriff doing the physical work, he's going to let Friday basically physically assault his suspect and, kind of come by to snap on the handcuffs after that's done. But Lancelot is going to fill the sheriff in here on the local lore of what this Crescent Rock is. And he goes to this sort of flashback thing where he says, the story of the town is that years and years and years in the past, it was believed that the town women had to choose a baby, the weakest of them, from the babies that were born that time of the year around winter, to go and leave on Crescent Rock as a sacrifice to the gods who were going to
ensure the arrival of a new spring and a new year.
Yeah, and so you've got this sort of legend, and we have some suggestion that maybe Friday and Lancelot have encountered ghosts or something like that in the course of their mystery solving during their younger years. And I'll say this, Ed Brubaker, even when he is telling like crime noir stories, he likes to drift into the supernatural. And so knowing that about this writer, it's not surprising to find that here. And it's also not surprising that at least early on, there's going to be a question for us of whether there really is something supernatural that's happening, or whether real life circumstances are just, in a spooky woods made to have a heightened sense of feeling about them. And we know, actually, that the case that they're working on at this point, they are trying to track down Wilson Weasel Wadsworth. He's a local rich kid, and he's a bully, and he has stolen some kind of ancient stone dagger from a nearby archaeological dig. And so, to go back to Scooby-Doo, it does sort of, you've got this ancient artifact, and you've got this odd behavior, and when they finally do find Weasel, we'll just call him for the rest of the time, when they finally find Weasel in the woods, he's got this crazed look about him, and he's got this stone knife, and he's carving something into a tree. I can't help but, Mom, I don't know whether you'll be familiar with this cartoon or not, but do you remember a cartoon they did in the, I think, early 90s, a pup named Scooby-Doo?
I don't remember that one. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. It was the Scooby-Doo gang, except all as elementary age kids. And Scooby-Doo is a puppy, of course. And Fred always wanted to accuse the local bully, whose name was Red Herring, as the person who was going to be under the mask that they pulled off. And, so there was always some point in the story where he said, the villain was actually Red Herring, and he'd pull the mask off, and it wouldn't be this kid. And in some way, it seems like they've foiled Weasel's plans before as they were growing up, whether he was selling drugs or whether he was stealing
they were always
lunch.
on his case.
Yeah, whether he was stealing lunch money, whatever it was. So I couldn't help but remember that. When they finally do find Weasel out here in the woods, we learn that Friday is the muscle for this operation, and she's going to pack a snowball with ice and a rock and throw it at Weasel to knock him out, which the sheriff just allows to happen.
Yeah, and they describe it as the outside layer of ice and snow is roughly 1 inch thick, and the center was the biggest rock you could find.
Her special snowball.
Yeah.
And
She calls it an ice ball.
And I've been in a lot of snowball fights. Thankfully, never connected one that had a rock in the middle. But
That would hurt.
Even just an icy snowball can really hurt a lot. So she connects with the snowball she throws at Weasel, and it hits him, but it doesn't knock him out. And in fact, he comes back at her and tackles her and knocks her over, and there's a chase through the woods that's going to ensue before he's finally caught and brought into the police car. And during this, at some point, he's muttering, and he's clearly out of his mind at this point, and he starts talking about the white lady. And I don't think he's just referring to some white lady. He's talking about the white lady, as if, capital W, capital L. And her children will find her. Then at some point, he actually does get knocked out. He's in the back of the sheriff's car, and he starts to come to, and he looks at Friday, and he says to her, "She sees you. The white lady knows you." And so Friday is just totally kind of freaked out by this at this point, because she has no idea what this is going on here. Well, of course, because they've beaten up Weasel, they have to take him to the hospital. And so the sheriff and Lancelot go inside, and they drop Weasel off in the emergency room. And Friday is left just waiting outside on the sidewalk. And as Lance and the sheriff come out, they're ready to just go on with their investigation. In fact, they ditch Friday here. Mm-hmm. They tell her, "Hey, do you mind finding your own way home here from the hospital? Here's your suitcase back out of the police car, because remember, you never got home to begin with." They're going to go back to the woods, and they're going to take some pictures of whatever these carvings were that Weasel was making. So poor Friday Fitzhugh did not get to have the conversation that she wanted to have with Lancelot Jones. And she really didn't get to enjoy her first evening back home with her family either. But she calls to get a ride home from the hospital now instead of the train station. And she's left upset that the night didn't go the way she had wanted. And we close Chapter 1 with just this page of the night sky. We see a tree with, of course, there are no leaves left on it this time of year. And we see this owl and the moon. And it's a really beautiful final page.
It's a pretty scene.
It doesn't seem to have anything, narratively to add, at least as far as I can tell.
No.
But it's just a very pretty way to end the last page of this chapter.
It is. But I also noticed we always think about owls and what they see at night. And as you look back through the pages, there's a big focus on the eyes of whichever character is sort of front and center at the time. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't know if maybe the owl was just sort of a representative of...
Oh, that's interesting. So some symbolic meaning about the owl being there.
Yes.
Yeah, I do like that, because so much of this story is a nighttime story. Now, issue 2 that we're going to talk about, which is largely flashback, is a lot of daytime story. But the action in our current story that's being told really does.
Nighttime.
Yeah, it takes place at night. So let's go on and talk about Chapter 2, The Night Before She Left. And when I got to this, I just assumed that it was referring to the night before she left at the end of Christmas break to go back to school. But that's not what's going on here.
No.
We are going to go back in time and find out what that mystery is mystery to us as readers anyway, of what it is that Friday wanted to talk to Lancelot about.
Just before she left to go to college.
That's right, the night before she left to go to college. So we get a little bit of the backstory between Friday Fitzhugh and Lancelot Jones, and we learn that sometime around about the 6th grade, Friday and her family had moved to town. And Friday was an awkward kid to begin with, and you can see her character design. She looks like an awkward kid. She kind of dresses like an awkward kid. And
she has red hair.
Yeah,
that could be a problem.
Well, tell me about that, Mom. As a woman who has walked around with red hair all of her life.
Yes, I had red hair.
Did kids give you a hard time about your red hair?
Yes, everybody gave me a hard time about having red hair.
Oh,
yeah.
Until you met a man who loved you for that red hair.
That's right. Red hair wasn't cool until I became a late teenager, and then it became very cool.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Did it ever concern you that I ended up with a redheaded woman myself?
No, it didn't concern me.
Like in some psychological sense. I don't mean...
I kept hoping I would have a redheaded grandchild, but that never happened.
Sorry, Mom. And by the way, that window's closed.
Yes, I know. We can always hope.
Hey, by the way, so it's been Kid Central around here at your house the last couple of days. We've got my son Garrett, who is 9. We've got his older cousin Ryan, who is 10, and his older still cousin Colin, who is 12. Who's the best grandkid?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think Garrett's my favorite Arkansas grandson.
No, come on now. We're not, no cop-outs here.
I love them all.
Oh, okay. Well, if you're going to do that to me, that's fine.
You can be my favorite son.
Well, let me ask you this, though. So, you mean you had 2 children, me and Kelly.
Mm-hmm.
Who do you prefer?
Well, it depended on the day.
Who do you prefer now?
If you remember, I used to ask you who wants to be my favorite.
No, I don't.
Yes. And you would both go, oh, me, because I had something I needed you to do. So it depended on the day.
Fair enough. I've never used that approach with Garrett because I am certain, even though he is an only child, if I asked him who wants to be my favorite, I wouldn't get a hand raised.
He would probably prefer the dog be.
Yeah, if he knew what was coming, he'd be like, no, that's okay. I'm just as happy that Maggie the dog be the favorite for the day. Well, that's all right. So when we first see Friday in this flashback, we learn she was in about the 6th grade when she and her family moved to Kings Hill, which is the name of their town. And she was an awkward preteen at this point in time. She was kind of an outcast at school. She didn't really have a lot of friends. And we see her like ice skating and practicing hockey, playing just by herself. And as she is doing so, she hears yelling, cries for help that are coming along. And it's this younger, smaller kid, Lancelot Jones. And he is being bullied at this point in time, being actually like drugged by the back of his winter coat by Wally Wadsworth, who we'll learn is the older brother of Weasel Wadsworth. Yes. So he's part of this same no-good rich family that's always looking down and bullying everybody. And he's dragging Lancelot to where he's going to throw him in the lake, into the frozen lake if he can. But we're immediately going to have this girl who is younger. She's a 6th grade girl, and Wally, we know, is like the captain of the high school football team and the prom king, and so he's
homecoming king. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So he's quite a bit older, and she is going to physically intervene and knock him out. She does a slap shot with her hockey puck and sends it right at his head and knocks him down, and ends up scaring the friends off, and they run away. The cronies that are there alongside Wally. And Lancelot is impressed by this, and he jumps up in his own very awkward way and says, "Lancelot Jones, at your service," and puts his hand out to shake. And he proposes that she become his bodyguard, which is such a funny way for these 2 kids to begin their friendship.
Yeah. Side note there, she told the boys to take their stupid friend and get out of here, and maybe I won't tell the whole town that he got knocked out by a 6th grader. So she kind of shut them down so they wouldn't make an issue out of it.
Yep.
And then, yes, that's where she gets to meet Lancelot Jones for the first time.
And then we have this really fun couple of pages that proceeds where we're told by the narrator that for the years that would follow, the next 6 years, Friday and Lancelot would become this crime-solving team or mystery-solving team where they would go around town.
Well, he wanted to hire her as his bodyguard.
Right at first,
yeah.
But she becomes really more of his Watson.
Right.
The Watson to his Sherlock Holmes. And the way this is shown to us, we're told that they go on all these adventures over the years, and we're not going to do some long aside in the book to explain what those adventures were, but we get a sense of them through what look like either movie posters or maybe book jackets that you would see on some of these like Encyclopedia Brown type books, where it's The Case of the Magic Gauntlet or The Secret Beneath Arcadian Hall. And it looks like a lot of these stories, that are being told to us here as basically the capers that Fitzhugh and Lancelot Jones solved, as if they were these great adventures that could be made into their own books.
Yes.
I thought that was a really fun way of doing the storytelling.
It was.
And of course, we get to the problem that I think you encounter in almost any story of young people growing from their childhood into their teen years, especially when you have a boy and a girl in a friendship that things start to change, their feelings start getting in the way, and they have this unspoken bond between them of friendship, but also
the angst of teen love.
The angst of teen love, a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Because, it says that like Lancelot would get real moody anytime there was a boy who had a crush on Friday.
Right.
And one time one of the girls in class said that Lancelot was cute and she got all mad about it and she didn't really know why. She was trying to grapple with those feelings because she's like, he's not my boyfriend. I don't want him to be my boyfriend. I want him to be my friend. But she's very protective, but a protective in the like guarding her own feelings kind of way too.
Yeah.
And I think that's mutual with these two.
And Lance was the same way. He would get upset if he saw her talking to another boy.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, Mom, I am a sucker for like a high school romance story.
Really?
Give me that story all day long. That time when like you've never been in love before or those feelings are brand new. And this won't mean as much to you as it might to some of our listeners, but put on an early Dashboard confessional record and play it on repeat over and over again for me until the day I die. Oh, yeah. Let's.
I can take you to the YA section at the library.
Can we go later, Mom?
Yeah.
Well, that's really sort of where we are right now in this book.
Exactly.
So as we get into our senior year, and Friday is really still confused about her own feelings, she wants to do something that's going to make her feel like a normal girl. She wants to kind of push away from this relationship. And so she goes to the senior prom with a character named Danny Buttons. Mm-hmm. And how much do I love that? Danny Buttons.
And it says she wanted to be wanted.
That's right.
Like all the other girls.
Yeah, she wanted to be normal.
Yeah.
And maybe when they were in middle school, Lancelot and Friday had each other. And because they had that special friendship connection, they didn't feel the need to fit in.
Right.
But now she's come to a point in her life where she wants to. She doesn't want to be the weirdo outsider.
Right. But she finds out that kissing is not such a bad thing.
Yeah, she likes that. She likes that even if it's a little awkward.
Even if it's a little awkward.
And she spends the rest of that summer. This is her senior year summer. She's graduated, getting ready to go off to college. And she spends most of that time with Danny Buttons.
Yes, he was her boyfriend.
That's right. And none of it with Lancelot Jones. Until the day before she leaves.
That's right. Then things get awkward.
Yeah, so we see Friday walking through the woods during the afternoon time, and she's approaching this tree fort. It's at ground level, but it's built into this giant tree, and I'm going to tell you, it's the dopest tree house I ever saw in my life.
It's a great tree house.
Yeah, and this was their headquarters. They even had a sign on the door that said Jones and Fitzhugh Investigations. Mm-hmm. Lancelot, who is now, probably 16, 17 years old, and I guess would have graduated high school by this point.
He was probably out of high school before she was, and he just stayed there doing his investigating. And it looks like a lab almost.
Yeah, he's got like a microscope that he's looking through in there. They've got it set up as a really cool kind of headquarters for their investigations. And it's
archaeological things and books.
Yeah, and it's just fun to look at that. Yeah, they've got some like artifacts, probably a collection from their earlier mysteries. Mm-hmm. And she approaches him, and she's not going to let the awkwardness, the awkwardness is going to continue, but she's going to try and head that off a little bit because she is going to walk straight in and just put it to him.
Yeah.
Look, you don't know this, but I broke up with Danny 3 days ago, and I want to know, do you love me? And it's so awkward. He's hemming and hawing and saying, well, you're the only he's trying to do a very logical, rational thing. You're really the only girl I know, so I'm kind of afraid to say that I love you because it might just be that you're close to me.
Yeah. I don't really know any other girls that well.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really awkward.
It's so, I'm cringing for both of them.
Yeah.
And, I was in high school once. I know how this is.
Yep.
And she's going to cut through that, though. She's not going to accept these wishy-washy answers. She takes off her glasses, makes herself look even more appealing, and she says to me, do you want me? And he's like, I think so. And what proceeds from here is the most awkward, uncomfortable make-out session
Right.
that either of them is going to have in their lives.
They don't either one know what to do.
No. And we're not getting graphic or anything here in what's shown on the page.
No.
But it is very plainly told to us by our storytellers here, both artist and writer, that the moments that follow are moments that both of them are going to be thinking back on and kicking themselves real hard for a lot of years to come.
Well, and the narrator says, this was not the beginning of the magical romance of Lance and Friday.
No, it most certainly wasn't. And in fact, at some point, Friday just stands up and tells Lance that she's going to leave now. And then on her way out the door says, that wasn't weird. I think the lady protests too much, Mom.
Right.
And she's walking away, and of course she's replaying this scene in her mind. She's kicking herself over what happened because she realizes that she took a gamble and she thought maybe that risk would lead them to the next stage of their relationship.
Right.
And instead, she's in some despair that her best friend, who she loves the most in the world, it seems, she may have ruined something with him.
Right.
Or at least, boy, it's going to take a long time to get past this.
It is. And then she goes off to school and she's got 3 months to think about it.
That's right. But before she even gets there, though, she is walking away from this encounter so lost in her own thoughts that she doesn't notice she's gone off into a part of the woods she doesn't recognize.
She's lost.
And that's disorienting for her because she knows these woods like the back of her hand. There's no place in the woods she shouldn't know where she is. And she sees this figure, this woman, who is like shrouded in a cloak of some kind and has a walking stick. These are usually signs that this is not a normal person that you're encountering in the woods. And when we actually see her face, I mean, she has this white, long, stringy hair, and her face is all pale and wrinkled, as if this is like an ancient witch of some kind.
Yes.
This is another sign, and I've commented on this before in earlier podcasts. You see this in comics where everybody's word balloons had been just regular white word balloons with, black lettered text. And when this old lady speaks and she says, "Oh, my child, my lost child," her word balloons are red and the letters are white. And so this is different. And when we finally do see her face, it's scary.
It's creepy.
Yeah.
Almost skeleton-like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we'll have a couple of pages that follow where, for our comic reader listeners, if someone told you that this was the art of Trad Moore for a page or two, or if it was the art of Martin Marazzo from Ice Cream Man, you would say, oh, yeah, okay, I get it, I see that. Because it's very trippy, I think is really the best way to describe it.
I was kind of lost during it. I figured it was more like it's almost like a dream sequence.
Yeah. Well, and the last page of this sequence, Friday is still terrified, and she's looking up at the sky, and that witch's face, or that woman's face, has sort of merged.
Morphed.
Yeah. It's sort of merged into like this cloud formation, but it's like it's screaming at her or something. And then she sees Lancelot, and he's yelling something at this woman's face, but she can't make out exactly what it is. Then we learn, oh, this was a dream sequence. So she like bolts upright in bed, and she's sitting there now terrified, realizing, okay, it was all a dream. But it felt so real, especially because in her mind's eye, it merged right from this awkward moment of walking through the woods, beating herself up, into, okay, now I'm waking up in my bed. What just happened? But she just kind of goes on, and, I don't know how she's processing it exactly at this point. But she gets up the next day, and she gets on that train and leaves town.
Yeah, but she had the awkward goodbye with Lance.
Yeah, Lance comes to the train station to see her off, and he kind of side hugs her.
Yeah.
And they don't really make eye contact with each other.
I love the side hug.
Oh, it's brutal. So now we come back to the present time, and it is, Friday's home from her first semester of college, and she's in her bed at her house, and she's had this awkward first night back with Lance, where she didn't get to resolve any of her anxieties about their relationship, because all they did was go hunt down Weasel and beat him up and put him in the hospital.
Right.
And I guess recover this stone dagger.
Artifact.
Yeah, this artifact. And she starts having this same dream again. Except this time, at the moment when Lancelot Jones appears and starts yelling at the face in the sky, she can make out what he's actually saying. And he says, "Stop, white lady. Not her. She's not the one." Her eyes pop wide open. She's in bed. And she has this moment of realization, like, the white lady? That's what Weasel was talking about earlier tonight.
Notice Lance's words there are in pink bubbles, which is different.
Oh, you're right, yeah. As part of the dream sequence. But they are somehow more powerful than the normal white word balloons that he has, too, I think, in throughout the rest of the text. So Friday can't just let this go. She's got to get up out of her bed in the middle of the night. She pulls on her boots and her heavy winter coat, and she climbs out the window, and she's going to start making her way across town to look for Lance. And she says that she knows that he'll be awake because whenever they're working on a case, Lance never really sleeps.
And there are the owls at the end of chapter 2.
Yeah, so we close at the end of chapter 2 with another one of these shots of the sky, and it's snowing really hard here, where it was just a clear night sky at the end of issue 1. And now there are 2 owls.
3.
And now there are 3 owls.
I'm sorry.
No. I'm glad you pointed that out. Because, Mom,
I'm the one with the presbyopic eyeballs here.
I don't know what that means.
Boomer ones.
Okay. Oh, man. What should I have called you instead of Boomer earlier? Should I have said
I'm perfectly okay with that. I'm a boomer.
Okay. Yeah, Mom, I was about to make this suggestion that maybe part of the, chapter 1, chapter 2 was we had 1 owl at the end of chapter 1 and we had 2 owls at the end of chapter 2. I guess that's not what's going on here.
No, there are 3.
Yeah. These owls are getting closer, too. So we go now into chapter 3, which is the last chapter that's in this volume, this book 1. And it's called Shadows in the Storm. And it picks up right where we left off at the end of the last chapter. Friday has left her house. It's still the middle of the night. And this snowstorm that is coming up around her is getting increasingly heavy. And to go back to our discussion of the way a New England night is depicted and a New England town is depicted with the art in this book, this issue is where I think it just shines through the best. I felt
pretty classic.
It is.
Yeah.
I felt warm, even though she's, surely freezing. I felt warm as she is walking for several pages of this chapter through the town at night.
It's nice to reminisce about the snow like that, but not necessarily live through it.
That's right.
When it's that cold and that wet.
So as we said, a lot of this third issue is just dedicated to the atmosphere of the town at night in the snowstorm, and to Friday wrestling with her own thoughts and her feelings about reuniting with Lancelot, and whether she was regretful for what had changed, or whether she had initiated the romantic encounter with Lancelot, maybe to force a change in their relationship of some kind. Maybe it was some kind of I have to move on with the next phase of my life. I can't be stuck here. And so I'm going to do something dramatic.
And as Friday is walking through the town, she sees someone and realizes that it is Father Poole. He is searching for French fry. We don't understand yet who or what French fry is. I didn't know if it's a dog or a cat, or I didn't know. But we do find out it is a dog. She knows that he knows a lot about local lore. So she asks Father Poole if he knows anything about the white lady. And he thinks about it a minute and then says, he thinks maybe, but she was called the Lady of Light. And then French Fry comes back, who's a lovely little dog. And that's the end of that conversation. She doesn't find out much, but she's starting to put the white lady and the light together somehow.
Right. And it's kind of a strange vignette, but really adds to the story in that it introduces this character who's just another part of this small town. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's not a town so small that absolutely everybody knows each other, but it's a town that's small enough that it can have its characters that everybody knows. Mm-hmm. And Lancelot is probably one of those characters, and certainly Father Poole here is. And
Father Poole is a character who no one has ever heard a sermon from him.
Right. Yeah, who made him Father Poole? People just taking on these priestly type titles. I don't think I can get behind this, Mom. But eventually Friday ends up making her way to the lighthouse where Lancelot lives with his father, and she's trying to wake him up, and she realizes, oh, he's not there. She sneaks into his bedroom, in fact, comes in through the window of his room, and he has left her a note there. He knows her well enough to know, yeah, she's going to show up here, and she's kind of mad about that a little bit too. Like, he knows me better than I like. The note tells her to go to the headquarters, their HQ at that awesome treehouse, and she goes outside and she goes and finds a sled. And then we have a really fun couple of pages where she's like just riding this sled through the woods as the fastest way to get to the treehouse where she's going to meet up with Lancelot. But along the way, she sees it's either some very bright light in the sky or maybe a bolt of lightning coming down. I couldn't exactly tell which.
No, I don't know either. And by the way, before you get there, this says page 90 on the digital copy. There's an owl flying above her.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, there's some kind of a light bolt
and she
in the
sees
distance.
Right, and she sees it and she realizes it's landing or coming up or going up or coming down very near where her clubhouse is.
Right.
And so she's alarmed and she immediately rushes there, and it's a good thing that she does because she gets there and she sees that her clubhouse is on fire. And she rushes inside, really shows no concern for herself. I mean, she is protecting Lancelot. And she runs inside and finds him like knocked out on the floor, and his face is already burnt a little bit.
Yeah, this is a bad night.
Yeah, is it ever? At some point, she sees a figure like looking in the window, and she can't really make out what it is. It's just in shadow. And then she goes running outside to find out who this person is that's outside of the clubhouse, and gets hit on the back of the head by a branch. Not a falling branch, one that somebody is swinging at her.
Right.
And she gets knocked down and gets loopy for just a moment. And as she's starting to come back to her senses, she realizes there are
two sets of footprints.
Yeah, two sets of tracks that are running away into the night. And her instinct tells her to go chase them. But she also realizes they've gotten away at this point, and Lancelot is still inside this building that's on fire. And so she drags him out, basically by his collar, out into the snow. And she realizes he's in really bad shape. We as the readers don't know, is he dead? Is he unconscious? What's going on? And this book 1 ends with her just like collapsing over him. She's on her knees kind of looking at her friend, and she says, "What did they do to you?"
Right. It's a cliffhanger.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Now, fortunately, it's a cliffhanger in an era where the entire story has been told, but I'll confess to you, it was Christmas the last time I read Volume 2, so 8 months ago at this point, and I don't remember what happens next. Now, I sent you a copy of Volume 1 in the mail so that you could read it before I arrived here. But then you got to the end of 1 and you went to the library and got a copy of 2.
I did. I found a copy of Friday, Chapter 1, Book 1, and Book 2 at the library. And I had no idea that the Book 3 had just come out last week.
Yeah.
So
yeah, the timing was really weird. When I had written down months ago that this was a book that I wanted to do with you, and it just so happened that Book 3 came out when I was making my trip out here to see you. And, of course, we've been trying all summer to plan this trip, and it's moved around a little bit. So, yeah the timing was really coincidental. And I'm looking forward to reading that Book 3.
Me too. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, so I'm looking forward to finding out what the ending is.
Well, and I'm hoping that maybe around Christmas time, when I'll be back here to visit again, we can do books 2 and 3, maybe all in one shot for a follow-up episode.
Can you make it a short story?
I don't know, Mom. But I'm looking at the counter here. This is going to be the shortest episode of one of our full episodes with
That's okay with me.
Well, good. Mom, this has really been awesome. Part of the joy of doing this podcast has been that it gives me a reason to sit down and have a dedicated conversation with somebody. And look, nobody is being asked to come on here and be a guest on this show unless I really want them to. And, I guess that's what's nice.
I'm honored. Thank you so much for asking me.
Hey, you're my mom, and I hope to inherit wealth someday from you. So I hope this made you happy.
It did. It made me happy.
Good. Well, Mom, thank you for being here with us. And I'm going to look forward to the next time you think I can get you to sign up to do this again.
Okay.
Well, good. We will finish out Friday, books 2 and 3 next time. Not next time as in next podcast, but coming up in a couple of months. And thank you to all of our listeners for being here with us today. And as always, keep reading those comics.